My daughter-in-law, Clara, in her final terrifying moments in that house, screamed that I was a witch who had cursed her reflection. The terrible irony, the part that chills me to my very soul, is that she was the one who cast the first spell. She didn't need a cauldron or a dusty book of shadows. Her magic was woven from threads of pure cruelty, and her incantation was the simple, steady whisper of my own son's name. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Agnes. My name is Agnes Reed. I'm 75 years old, and I come from a small, misty town, nestled deep in the Louisiana bayou, a place where the Spanish moss hangs from the cypress trees like secrets, and the air is thick with stories older than memory itself. This is a story that has festered in the shadows of my heart for 3 long years. Not a soul on this earth knows what truly happened in that house, the one that now stands empty at the end of the lane. The townspeople call it a tragedy. The police called it a mystery with no leads. But I know the truth. It's a truth I've been too afraid to even whisper to the wind, for fear it might take shape and come back for me. Before I dare to drag this secret into the light, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Knowing you're listening, knowing I'm not just speaking into the void, gives an old woman like me the courage to speak of things that sanity itself wishes to forget. It all started 5 years ago, on a humid afternoon, when the air was so heavy you could drink it. That was the day my son, Michael, my sweet boy, brought Clara home to meet me for the first time. Before that day, my life was like the still, dark water of the bayou, quiet, deep, and peaceful. My husband, Samuel, had been gone for nearly a decade, but his presence was still etched into every inch of our home. He had built this house with his own 2 hands, felling the cypress himself and raising the walls against the summer storms. I could still feel the warmth of his hand on the worn banister, still smell the faint, comforting scent of his pipe tobacco and sawdust that had settled deep into the wooden beams. This house wasn't just wood and nails to me. It was the vessel of my entire life. It was my sanctuary. My days followed a simple, comforting rhythm. In the mornings, I'd work in my garden, my fingers deep in the dark, rich soil. I grew tomatoes and okra, but my real pride was my herb garden. Lavender and rosemary, mint and chamomile, and other, older herbs my own grandmother had taught me about. The ones for easing fevers, for soothing troubled sleep, for calming an anxious heart. The townspeople sometimes called me a healer. And I suppose in my own small way I was. My life was not lonely. It was blessedly solitary. I had my books, my garden, the quiet companionship of the crickets at dusk, and the weekly phone calls from Michael. Oh, my Michael. Before Clara, he was the sun in my sky. Even after he moved to the city for work, he never forgot his old mother. Every Sunday, like clockwork, the phone would ring. "Hi, Mama," he'd say, and his voice was a balm to my heart. He'd visit every other month, his car kicking up dust on the lane, and he'd sink into his father's big armchair with a contented sigh, letting me spoil him with crawfish etouffee and warm beignets. He loved this old house. He loved my cooking. He loved me. Or so I believed. I believed our bond was as strong and deep-rooted as the ancient oaks outside. I never imagined a vine could grow around it so quickly, so silently, and strangle the life from it. That vine was Clara. When Michael's car pulled up that fateful afternoon, she emerged from the passenger side like a creature from another world. She was tall and slender, dressed in a sharp white pantsuit that seemed to defy the Louisiana humidity. Her hair was a severe, glossy black bob, and her face was a perfect porcelain mask. She was beautiful, you know, but it was the beauty of a frost pattern on a window pane, intricate, cold, and forbidding. "Mama, this is Clara," Michael said, beaming, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Agnes," she said, and her voice was as crisp and cool as her suit. She extended a hand, and her handshake was brief and bloodless. She looked around at my porch, at my hanging ferns and pots of herbs, and a small, tight smile played on her lips. "Michael has told me so much about your home. It's very authentic." Authentic, God. That was the first word. Not charming, Not lovely, not warm. Authentic. The way a scientist might describe a tribal artifact. In that moment, a tiny cold pebble of unease dropped into the pit of my stomach. I had spent 2 days cooking for their visit. The table was laden with all of Michael's favorites. But Clara barely touched a thing. She eyed the gumbo with suspicion. "My stomach is a little sensitive," she explained, pushing a single shrimp around her plate with her fork. She discreetly wiped my antique silverware, my mother's silverware, with her napkin before using it. I saw the gesture. It was small, quick, but it felt like a slap. Michael, lost in his adoration, didn't notice a thing. Or if he did, he chose not to see. Throughout the dinner, I felt her eyes on everything. Not with interest, but with assessment. She looked at the faded family photographs on the mantelpiece, at the worn patch on Samuel's armchair, at the hand-stitched quilts I'd draped over the sofas. It was the calculating gaze of a new owner planning a complete renovation, mentally tearing down walls and throwing out a lifetime of treasures she considered to be junk. After that first visit, the changes in Michael began. They were subtle at first. The weekly phone calls became shorter, more perfunctory. "Clara and I are busy with a project," he'd say, his voice distant. When I'd mentioned something about the house or my garden, there would be a pause, and I could almost hear her whispering to him in the background. His defenses of her were immediate and sharp. I once mentioned, as gently as I could, that I hoped Clara had enjoyed the visit. "Mama, that's just how she is," he'd said, a new edge to his voice. "She's from the city. She's not used to all this. All this. My life, my home, my very being, reduced to all this." 6 months later, they were engaged. It felt sudden, rushed. And then came the conversation I had been dreading, a premonition that had been haunting my sleep. Michael called, and his voice had a false, practiced brightness. "Mama, we have the most wonderful idea," he'd gushed. "We've been thinking, this house is so big. And you're all alone. We worry about you. And you know, with the wedding and trying to save for a future, paying city rent is just... So, we were thinking, what if we moved in with you?" None. His words were almost a perfect echo of the concerns Clara had voiced on her first visit. I could feel her influence, her logic, wrapped around his tongue. A cold fear, slick and venomous like a water moccasin, slithered up my spine. My inner world became a raging storm of doubt and fear. Was I being a selfish, possessive old woman? He was my son. This was his childhood home. Who was I to deny him? But my soul screamed a silent, no. This house was my peace. It was my connection to Samuel. It was the only thing left in the world that was truly mine. Maybe I'm being paranoid, I told myself, night after night, staring at the ceiling. She's young. She's different. My ways are old ways. Maybe I am the one who needs to bend. But then, I would remember her smile. It was a smile that didn't promise warmth, but a long, cold winter. Her presence in my home, I knew, would feel like a slow creeping ivy, the kind that looks so beautiful as it strangles the life from a mighty old oak. Against my better judgment, against every screaming instinct in my body, I said yes. How could I not? Saying no would mean losing my son completely. I knew that. Clara had already made sure of it. They moved in during the fall. Clara's belongings, all sharp lines and monochrome colors, seemed to invade my warm, cluttered home like an occupying army. My hand-stitched quilts were folded away and replaced with gray cashmere throws. My collection of mismatched, comfortable mugs was relegated to the back of a cupboard, replaced by a set of stark white, handleless cups that were impossible to drink from. And she began her quiet war against my herbs. My little bundles of dried lavender and sage, which I hung by the windows to freshen the air and keep insects at bay, were the first to go. "Agnes, the house smells like a swamp," she'd said, her nose wrinkled in distaste as she took them down and threw them in the trash. "Let's get some nice, clean-scented plugins." One afternoon, she found me brewing a chamomile and lemon balm tea for a headache. She watched me from the doorway, her arms crossed, a smirk on her face. "What's that potion you're making now?" she asked. The word potion dripped with mockery. "It's just tea, dear," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "It helps with headaches." She let out a little, airy laugh. "Oh, Agnes. I prefer my medicine from a pharmacy, thank you. Not from some garden experiment. All these leaves and roots and little bundles, honestly, it's all a bit spooky, isn't it? A little witchy. Witchy. She said it with a laugh, as a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was a test. It was a label. She was planting a seed, not in my garden, but in my son's mind. The seed of an idea, that I was strange, that my ways were dark, that I was not a harmless old woman in a country house, but something to be wary of, something to be controlled, something perhaps to eventually be removed. The real curse wasn't cast on a reflection in a mirror. The first curse was that single, poisonous word, and it was cast directly upon me. And I was terrified, because as she said it, I looked over at my son, and he didn't defend me. He just gave a weak, uncomfortable smile, and looked away. In his silence I knew. The witch had her first believer. The word witchy, once spoken, did not fade. It lingered in the air of my home, like a foul odor, a poison that Clara delighted in spraying into every corner. It became her favorite little joke, her cruelest pet name for me. If I was in the kitchen, humming an old tune while stirring a pot, she would walk past and say to Michael, loud enough for me to hear, "Oh, look at Mama Agnes, probably casting a good luck spell on the casserole." If a friend from my church group called, Clara would answer the phone with a sickly sweet voice. "Oh, I'm sorry. Agnes is in her garden right now, probably talking to her plants. You know how it is." Little by little, my world shrank until it was confined to the walls of that house. And even within those walls, I was a ghost. My home, once my sanctuary, began to feel like a beautifully decorated cage, and Clara was the ever-watchful warden. She had a new lock put on the front door, a complicated digital one. "For security, Agnes," she'd chirped, but she only gave the code to Michael. I was effectively locked in. She started collecting the mail from the mailbox at the end of the lane. "To help you, Agnes, you know how you forget things," she'd say, sorting through my letters, my privacy with her slender fingers. My few remaining friends stopped calling, tired of Clara's polite but impenetrable barricade. The most crushing blow was watching the slow, complete erosion of my son. The boy I had raised, the one who loved my stories and the scent of my baking, was gone. In his place was a hollowed-out man, a puppet whose strings were pulled by his wife's expert hands. His eyes, when they met mine, held a confusing mixture of pity, irritation, and a terrifying flicker of suspicion. He started to parrot her words. "Mama, Clara's right. Maybe you should rely less on those remedies. Mama, please don't hang those herbs in the living room. They make Clara's allergies act up." There were no allergies. The only thing she was allergic to was me. My inner monologue became a desolate wasteland of pain. Was my son truly gone? Was this tired, anxious man wearing his face a complete stranger? I would lie awake at night, listening to the house settle around me. The familiar creaks and groans that used to sound like sleepy sighs now sounded like warnings. A deep, suffocating tension replaced the scent of old books and dried rosemary. "Maybe I am just a foolish old woman," a desperate voice in my head would whisper. "Maybe I am difficult and strange. Maybe if I just tried harder, if I became smaller, quieter, more invisible, my Michael would come back to me." Clara's cruelty was a campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts, each one aimed at the things I held most dear. My husband Samuel's memory was her favorite target. She began to misplace his things. His favorite worn copy of Moby Dick, its pages soft as cloth, vanished from the bookshelf. "Are you sure it was there, Agnes? I cleaned this shelf last week, I didn't see it." The small, intricately carved wooden bird he had made for me on our 10th anniversary, the one that sat on my bedside table for 40 years, disappeared. I confronted her, my heart hammering with a desperate grief. "Clara, have you seen my little wooden bird? The one Samuel made? It was right here." She didn't even look up from the fashion magazine she was reading. I haven't touched your little trinkets, Agnes. You probably put it somewhere for safekeeping and forgot. It's perfectly normal at your age. Just then Michael walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. What's going on? He asked, sensing the tension. Clara looked up at him, her face a perfect mask of concern. Nothing, honey. Your mom's just misplaced another one of her things. I keep telling her she should let me organize her room for her. It would make things so much easier to find. Michael sighed, a weary, burdened sound. He wouldn't even look at me. Mom, just try to remember where you put it, okay? Don't bother Clara, she's had a long day at work. I'm serious? Bother, Clara. I was a bother. A forgetful old woman, misplacing trinkets. My heart, which I thought had been broken so many times it could only be scar tissue, found a new way to break. And that's when the mirrors began to change. It started so subtly that I was sure I was imagining it. I was walking down the hallway and caught my reflection in my mother's old antique mirror, the one with the ornate silver leaf frame. As I turned my head to walk into the kitchen, for a split second, I thought I saw my reflection linger, its head still facing forward, watching me go. I stopped, my heart skipping a beat. I turned back. There was just me, a tired, sad old woman staring back. It's my eyes, I told myself. My old eyes are playing tricks on me. But then it happened again, a week later. I was in the living room, dusting the television. The screen was dark, a black mirror. As I worked, I saw my reflection. But it wasn't hunched over with a dust rag. It was standing perfectly straight, its hands clasped, watching me with an expression of profound sadness. I froze, my hand hovering over the screen. The reflection held my gaze. It was me, but it was also not me. It was a version of me that was not defeated. A version that was waiting. Fear, a new and terrifying kind, began to take root in my soul. Was I losing my mind? Was this what grief and loneliness finally did to a person? Was Clara's poison so potent that it was seeping not just into my son's mind, but into the very fabric of my own sanity? I started seeing her everywhere. My watchful, silent reflection in the polished surface of the dining room table, staring back at me from a rain-slicked window pane at night. Her expression was always the same, a calm, knowing sorrow, a terrible strength. The house didn't feel haunted by a ghost. It felt like it was being haunted by me. The final straw, the blow that shattered the last vestiges of my hope, was delivered on a silver platter of joy. Clara was pregnant. Michael was ecstatic, a shadow of his old, happy self returning to his eyes. For a fleeting moment, I felt a spark of warmth. A grandchild. A new life in this house of creeping shadows. But I saw the look on Clara's face, and my blood ran cold. It was a look of pure, reptilian triumph. She had her ultimate weapon now, and she wasted no time in using it. A week after the announcement, she sat me down. Michael stood behind the sofa she was on, his hands resting on her shoulders like a sentry. Agnes, Clara began, her voice soft and dangerously reasonable. We need to talk about the future, about the baby. She placed a protective hand on her still flat stomach. I'm not comfortable. I don't feel safe raising a child in this environment, with all the strange energy, the spooky rituals. The doctor says stress is very bad for the baby. I just stared at her, my mind a roar of silent disbelief. My herbs, my quiet prayers, my love. She had twisted it all into something sinister. So we've decided, she continued, her eyes as hard as pebbles. You have two choices. For the good of our child. We have found a very nice assisted living facility for you, just outside of town. Or, she paused, letting the weight of the word hang in the air, we will move out. We'll find our own place. And Michael and the baby, we won't be able to visit. It would just be too stressful. It was an executioner's choice. Banishment or excommunication. I looked at my son, my beautiful boy, and I pleaded with my eyes. Don't do this. Please, not this. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just stared at the wall behind me, his face pale and slick with sweat. "It's for the best, Mama," he whispered, and the words were not his own. They were hers. In that moment, hearing my own son bargain away my life, something inside me didn't just break, it burned. The grief for the boy he used to be, the desperate love I had clung to, it all turned to ash. And from that ash, something new and hard and cold was forged. The reflections. My silent, watchful companions in the mirrors. They weren't a sign of my madness. They were my allies. The spirit of this house, the memory of my mother and my Samuel, my own repressed, forgotten strength. They were showing me that I was not alone. I looked past my son, past his cruel, triumphant wife, and into the dark glass of the dining room hutch behind them. My reflection stared back, and her face was no longer sad. It was furious. She nodded at me, just once, a sharp, decisive movement. And I knew. I could not go on like this. I would not. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me. I stopped pleading. I stopped fighting. I looked at Clara and gave her a small, empty smile. "You will do what you must," I said, my voice as quiet as the grave. That night, after they were asleep, I got out of bed. I went to my secret stash of herbs, the ones Clara hadn't found. Rosemary, for remembrance. Sage for cleansing. Angelica root, for power and protection. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I performed a ritual not of dark magic, but of claiming what was mine. I walked through the silent house, my house, and I touched every mirror. The big one in the hall. The one over the bathroom sink. The dark screen of the television. With my fingers dipped in moonlit water and crushed herbs, I touched each surface. And I didn't whisper a curse. I whispered a prayer. A prayer to the spirit of the house, to the memories living in its walls, to the strength of the women who had lived here before me. I prayed for the truth to be seen. I prayed for the mirror to show not what the eyes see, but what the soul is. The next morning, the screaming began. It was Clara, a shrill, terrified sound that ripped through the morning quiet. I was in the kitchen, calmly making coffee, and I didn't flinch. Michael came thundering down the stairs, his face white with panic. "What's wrong with her?" He ran into the master bathroom. I followed, slowly. Clara was standing in front of the large vanity mirror, her hands clawing at her own face. She was staring at the mirror, but she wasn't seeing herself. She was seeing me. Reflected in the mirror was my own image. I was standing there in my simple nightgown, my face calm, my eyes watching her. "Get out of my face!" she shrieked at the reflection. She turned to Michael, her eyes wild with terror. "Don't you see her? She's in the mirror. Get her out." Michael just stared, confused. "What are you talking about, honey? There's no one there. It's just you." She didn't believe him. She ran into the bedroom to her full-length closet mirror. She let out another, choked sob. There I was again, her silent, reflected replacement. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, her thumb swiping to activate the camera, to use its black screen as a mirror. My face stared back at her from the small device. It was then I understood. The house had answered my prayer. Michael could see his own reflection. He could see Clara. But Clara, wherever she looked, could only see the witch she had created. Her sanity unraveled like a spool of thread. For 2 days, she was a prisoner in a house of mirrors that had turned against her. She smashed the bathroom mirror, but every jagged shard on the floor reflected a tiny, perfect image of my calm, watching face. She covered the other mirrors with sheets and towels, but then she'd catch my eye in the toaster, in a soup spoon, in a puddle of spilled water. On the 3rd day, she broke. With a final, animalistic scream, she ran out of the house, out of the gate, and down the lane, never once looking back. She left everything behind. Michael was a shattered man. The scales had been violently ripped from his eyes. He saw the depth of his wife's cruelty, and the terrifying, inexplicable result. He stumbled to me in the kitchen, his body racked with sobs. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I don't understand." But some things, once broken, can never be mended. I looked at my son, and I loved him, but the boy I had loved was gone forever. The chasm between us was too vast, filled with too many unspoken cruelties. He left a week later, a hollow man going off to find his hollow wife. The house was quiet again. The reflections returned to normal. But it was a new kind of silence. It wasn't the lonely silence of grief, nor the tense silence of fear. It was the deep, resonant silence of reclaimed power. They say you can't fight cruelty with cruelty. But I learned that sometimes, to survive, you must hold up a mirror to the wicked. You must force them to gaze, uninterrupted, at what they have tried to make of you. In doing so, they see not your face, but the horrifying true reflection of their own soul. Clara called me a witch. In the end, I did not curse her. I simply let her own venom be her only looking glass. If someone in your life is trying to make you feel small, to erase you, to rewrite your reality and call you crazy, trust that feeling in your gut. It's not madness, it's your spirit telling you the truth. Your soul is so much stronger than you know. Do not let them break your reflection. Do not let them convince you that their version of you is real. Stand your ground, and the very walls of your life will fight for you. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was not an easy one to tell. Please, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on that notification bell. If you feel comfortable, share a piece of your own story, or just a word of encouragement, in the comments below. We draw strength from knowing we are not alone in our battles. Love you all. This is Grandma Agnes, and I'll see you in the next story.